on this show do not reflect the views and opinions of our advertisers and management of Pacific Telestations Incorporated. You're watching Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Good evening, Guam. I'm Jess Lujan. Welcome to this edition of The Buzz. Great show tonight. I have Senator Chris Duenas, on the show tonight. Actually, we'll be talking about a bill that he just recently introduced. I think it was last week, Bill 281. And let me introduce him now and tell us all about it.
Sure, Jess.
Good evening, Chris. How you doing?
Thanks, Senator. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate this opportunity.
Sure.
And things have been good. And, you know, Jess, as you may remember, this was one of the 10 points that the governor had in his State of the Territory address. This in particular really is to solve a problem that we've had, of course, for decades now, and that Guam is currently under the consent decree on, and that's, of course, closing the ORDOT dump, and, of course, the maintaining and continuing to, supply for the lead zone landfill and its requirements to take care of our solid waste issues here on Guam. You know, what's interesting is that you know, my father under the first Cabo administration was the director of EPA, and in discussing issues of Superfund, the CERCLA action basically that was established in the federal government in 1980, basically was for these type of things, damages and environmental things that the federal government has caused throughout the states. And of course, with us being a territory of the United States, you know, their liability and their potential for being, you know, a participant in doing these things and causing this damage. And during that time, my dad, as we were sitting around talking about this issue, when he saw what I was doing, he remembered back then that, you know, there was a constant push from the U.S. EPA saying Guam needs to establish staffing at EPA and other regulatory agencies that manage a sanitary landfill. And the recognition, Senator Jess, was even going back to the time when the Navy opened and occupied and dumped basically munitions and other garbage in that dump. When it was turned over, it was never a sanitary landfill.
Sure. Now also, the studies have come back as well, and basically, you know, again, argues the case for us, basically, and says that, yeah, the military, of course, first used it. That's the site they use, and upon turning it over, you know, it wasn't, you know, the area wasn't cleansed, basically, you know, for lack of a better word for that. But, you know, how do you respond to, of course, there was a story that first came out, the Office of the Attorney General supports the cause. They support whatever it is that needs to be done. But also they came out and said, this is not a novel idea. It's you know, it's I guess, lack of a better word, it's a Hail Mary pass, basically. But they support it. How do you respond to that? And given the fact that we have, you know, we have documentation, I think we have a very good case.
Yes, you know, and what's interesting there, Senator, is that their response was a response to the chairman, whom I'm hoping will have a quick public hearing on this bill. Their response was in response to his writing to the Attorney General's office asking for their opinion on the bill. And I think what's contained in there really is maybe some discussion on it being a Hail Mary pass, but a strong recognition that it's something that should be done. I found it interesting myself, Senator, that the issue of it not being novel, I guess what's novel is doing something about it.
Well, that's what I guess I'm going. We have a good enough case. Why don't we pursue it? You know, I'm reading some of the blogs that bloggers that are coming in, you know, and are saying, hey, why are you trying to bite off the hand that feeds you and things of that nature? And this is absolutely not the fact. I mean, when why is it, Senator, that we have good cases, you know, on our side? Okay, there's case law, there's presentation, there's documentation that favors us or looks favorably, you know, on some of the issues that we're pursuing. That we have people that say, why are you trying to do it? It's a waste of money. Now, yes, if it's a frivolous lawsuit, it'll be a waste of money. But if you have good documentation and a good case to present, you know, a $300,000 appropriations for this that would yield us tens of millions of dollars to help close it. And this is not, again, that they would go at it alone. This is again, in concert with us.
Absolutely.
You know, and so that would, you know, $300,000 to get tens of millions.
Yeah.
I think I would invest that much.
Senator, let me give you a chronological order of how I see exactly what you're talking about, and I saw the same blogs and I hear the same conversation from some in our community.
Sure.
First of all, let's take the Attorney General. In their presentation, they clearly state, although albeit not novel, they say in their conclusion that it takes the technical expertise, and they recommend going through and getting the RFP out there so that a firm specializing in these areas would respond. Senator, there was a white paper that was produced that compiled all the information and drove us, myself, a very well noted attorney with the governor's office, Arthur Clark, very intelligent and knowledgeable, and reviewed all of the information in the white paper that clearly states that the U.S. EPA supports the fact that Guam has a case here, that in the United States, many of these cases under CERCLA, that's the whole reason for the Superfund being established. And you know, here's another thing, Senator Jess. The governor made it clear, and in my working with him made it clear, we are not asking for the federal government to come out here and take care of all of our bills. What we're asking as a potential liable party, that they pay their fair share, and they acknowledge what they've done. Senator Jess, you've been there and you've seen, not only as a senator, but in terms of, I remember us going around together and just meeting with the folks. When you see the containers of mustard gas, which there was no complaints about, you know, there was no CERCLA action or anything else when those things were cleaned up in Mighty. When you look at the PCBs down in Cocos on the Coast Guard station that's currently being monitored, there's no question about the fact that they'll mitigate that. When you look at the PCBs in Afami that have been cleaned up by the federal government, there's no question about that. When you go up to Arunau, I actually joked with some of my friends up there and relatives that they should have asked them to leave that zip line that they basically put because they cleared the whole side of the mountain, acres and acres, millions of dollars in cleanup that they acknowledged and did from all the dumping of the Air Force waste over the cliff line, and had just acknowledged. So the fact of the matter is, I think, you know, under the guidelines that the United States of America establishes for going forward with these suits, as you just pointed out, Senator, it's very clear, and I think the response to the RFP by firms who have technical expertise on these issues will demonstrate that there's a very good case here. And I think Andrew Gale put it the best, because I know you realize also, Senator, the board, the GSWA board, Solid Waste Authority board, had established and passed a resolution asking the governor and the legislature to go forward and do this. And Andrew Gale basically, I think, just put it best when he said, we can't afford not to do this.
That's right. That's right.
Leave no stone unturned and go after those monies that are due to Guam based on what can clearly be established here as liability.
And that's exactly my point here. You know, of course, you know, our case has to be argued and to be countered and things like that. But we have good backing in the sense that we have a good case. We definitely have a good case, and I'm sure we're going to bring a good case. You know, again, and I'm sure whoever responds to the RFP again will. And once that firm is chosen or individual is chosen, that, you know, they have the expertise in doing this.
Absolutely.
And then, you know, getting the documentations that they have at hand, they're going to say, you know, you're going to make our work a little easier.
Sure. you know, Senator, exactly that white paper. Here's another thing. As you were aware also, during the last administration, of course, the build-up, the eve of the build-up was announced there, and that the establishment of, in fact, many in government right now who did the work on the Civilian Military Task Force, which now has moved over to Mr. Calvo, Mark Calvo's, you know, in terms of the build-up office. And I think that even he would, you know, clear up the fact that the Department of Public Works was, at the time of the close of business when the first round of the build-up was supposed to happen, was at a price tag of $2.5 billion in terms of the impact of unmitigated, if went unmitigated, and the non-organic growth. A lot of that money, Senator, was associated with the fact that the JIGPO, you know, our counterparts who were former military generals and the like who understand these issues, recognized that they needed to be a partner, not only in closing ORDOT, but opening and maintaining that zone. Because even now, Senator, I believe Anderson Air Force is closed in terms of their landfill. I'm sure they're having a sanitary landfill now, not a dump like what existed before. And the Navy, from what I understand, during the time when we were doing our work with JIGPO, at that time, and that's a few years back now, was only a year and a half out from being in full capacity as well. So if you look at all these issues, we're joined on the issue regardless, and this is not Guam, with hat in hand, asking the federal government basically to pay our bills. It's a partnership.
No,
and it's
absolutely.
a recognition.
That, no, absolutely.
There's an obligation.
That's exactly what it is. It's a partnership in you're paying your fair share of the I guess the waste, okay, and what has gone on there over the years. Not to remove us again from some of the liability, but in doing so, we recognize that we've attributed a lot to it as well. But you have to recognize as well that you started this whole thing and you didn't clean it up before you gave it to us.
Well, here's another thing also, Senator, and I think this is why the board is so active about this, the Solid Waste Authority Board. First of all, let's start from what Guam has already done. Of course, under receivership, we have floated a $202 million bond that on its maturity will cost the taxpayers of Guam $360 million by the time it's all said and done. The receiver is already outpacing that schedule.
We haven't opened the other cells yet.
Absolutely. The thing is that because of the Clean Water Act and the way that this action was taken in terms of the violation, which is why now, I mean, if you look at CERCLA, it's a long acronym. It's basically Comprehensive Environmental Response Compensation and Liability Act, which is the Superfund basically of 1980. If really what we were dealing with was CERCLA straight away and had the partnership with the federal government, we probably wouldn't be up there now. I like to say this, Senator Jess, having a Mercedes-Benz for the family and Corvettes for the kids in terms of the type of closure that we're doing up there and the contract that was just issued and I believe stayed in terms of closing ORDOT. Here's what's ORDOT dump. Here's what's interesting, Senator. You can't have it both ways. You either are in violation in terms of the parts per billion and what's going into the river, L'Enfant River, and the violation. Here's what's also interesting. In terms of even some of that science now, the early days of the EPA, US EPA reports showed that all of the contaminants that they were coming up with in terms of the violation were unique to and very closely related to munitions type of dumping. So really, other than that, we may really, in terms of their measurements, not be that much in violation of the Clean Water Act. So what are we talking about here? Under CERCLA, if we have this partnership going forward, and we can establish that they were a party to this, there's no question, and it's already basically been established. If we share the responsibility here, maybe then when the U.S. Navy or the feds come back, U.S. EPA comes back and says, you know what? You don't need to spend $60 million on capping.
There we go.
I
tell you what, hold on to that thought. We're going to take a break right now because I'm going to talk to you about whether or not this is organic or not, because I don't see any lawsuits that the government of Guam can generate towards the federal government. It doesn't say so in the Organic Act.
Sure.
Be right back.
Sounds good.